In the vast empire of Persia, stretching from India to Ethiopia, there ruled a monarch whose authority seemed unshakable, King Ahasuerus, known to history as Xerxes I. His throne was set in the citadel of Susa, a city of opulence and political intrigue. In the third year of his reign, he hosted a grand banquet lasting 180 days, displaying the splendor of his kingdom to nobles, military leaders, and princes from every province. Marble pillars, fine linens of white and violet, silver rings, golden couches, every detail spoke of power and excess. At the height of this spectacle, the king commanded Queen Vashti to appear before his guests, wearing her royal crown to display her beauty. Yet in a moment that would alter the course of history, Vashti refused. Her absence ignited fury within the king and fear among his advisors, who warned that such defiance might inspire rebellion among women throughout the empire. Thus, by royal decree, Vashti was removed from her position as queen. In this unexpected upheaval, the stage was set for a young Jewish orphan, unknown, unseen, to find favor in a place she never imagined. After the king's anger subsided, his attendants proposed a solution: a search for the most beautiful young virgins throughout the empire to replace Vashti. Officers were appointed in every province to gather these women into the harem at Susa under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch. Among those taken was a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, known in the Persian court as Esther. She was the daughter of Abihail and cousin to Mordecai, who had raised her as his own child after her parents died. Esther's life had already been marked by loss and displacement. Her people were among the exiles, carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon generations earlier under King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, in a foreign land, she faced another turning point. Mordecai instructed her not to reveal her Jewish identity, a decision born of caution and wisdom in a kingdom not always kind to outsiders. Quietly, without protest, Esther entered the king's harem, uncertain of her fate, unaware that divine purpose was weaving through political chaos. Within the palace walls, the process of preparation was meticulous and lengthy. For 12 months, the young women underwent beauty treatments, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. It was a time not only of physical refinement but of quiet anticipation, as each woman awaited her turn to stand before the king. Esther, however, distinguished herself not by extravagance, but by grace and restraint. She won the favor of Hegai, who provided her with the best cosmetics, choice food, and 7 selected maidens to attend her. When her night came to approach King Ahasuerus, she asked for nothing beyond what Hegai advised. There was humility in her choices, a quiet confidence that did not demand attention. And when the king saw her, something unexpected occurred. Of all the women brought before him, Esther found favor and grace in his sight more than all the others. He set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. In a land far from her ancestors' promises, an orphaned exile became Queen of Persia. To honor Esther's coronation, the king held a great feast, called Esther's Banquet, for all his officials and servants. He granted a holiday in the provinces and distributed gifts according to his royal generosity. Yet even as celebration echoed through the palace halls, Esther maintained her silence regarding her heritage, just as Mordecai had instructed. Meanwhile, Mordecai himself sat daily at the king's gate, a place of administrative authority and civic life. It was there that he overheard a dangerous conspiracy. 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, who guarded the doorway, grew angry and plotted to assassinate King Ahasuerus. Mordecai learned of their scheme and relayed the information to Queen Esther, who in turn informed the king, crediting Mordecai. An investigation confirmed the plot, and the conspirators were hanged. The event was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. At the time, no reward was given to Mordecai, but in the unseen corridors of providence, a forgotten act of loyalty would soon resurface at the most critical hour. As Esther settled into her role as queen, a new figure rose to prominence within the empire, Haman the Agagite, son of Hammedatha. King Ahasuerus elevated him above all other officials, commanding that all servants at the king's gate bow and pay homage to him. Yet Mordecai refused. Whether from religious conviction or ancestral memory, Haman was an Agagite, likely descended from Israel's ancient enemy Amalek. Mordecai would not bow. His refusal enraged Haman, but personal offense soon expanded into genocidal ambition. Learning that Mordecai was a Jew, Haman scorned the idea of punishing one man alone. Instead, he sought to destroy all the Jews throughout the kingdom of Ahasuerus. Casting the pur, or lot, to determine the most favorable date, he selected the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, for their annihilation. With calculated deception, Haman approached the king, describing the Jews as a scattered and law-defying people whose customs differed from all others. Without naming them, he offered 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for permission to destroy them. The king, perhaps indifferent or unaware, removed his signet ring and gave it to Haman, sealing the decree with imperial authority. The edict went out swiftly, carried by royal couriers to every province. Letters were written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with his ring, commanding all people to destroy, kill, and annihilate every Jew, young and old, women and children, and to confiscate their goods on the appointed day. The royal scribes followed the king's command with precision, delivering the decree in the script of every province and in the language of its people. From the bustling streets of Susa to the distant reaches of the empire, the people were confused and terrified, unaware of the motives behind this decree. When Mordecai learned of the plot to annihilate his people, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city crying aloud in anguish. News of Mordecai's mourning reached Esther, who was deeply troubled by her cousin's grief. Mordecai sent her a message, urging her to intervene with the king. At this moment, the true challenge of Esther's life began, entering the court of power not for beauty or favor, but as a messenger of life for her people, balancing courage against the mortal risk of appearing before a king uninvited. Esther's initial reaction was fear, as approaching the king without being summoned was punishable by death unless the king extended his golden scepter in favor. She sent back a plea through Mordecai, explaining the danger and the risk to her life. Mordecai responded with words that echoed through the corridors of history. "Do not imagine that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this?" These words transformed fear into resolve. Esther recognized that her position as queen was not merely for personal gain or security, but for divine providence, a moment where courage could determine the fate of an entire nation. She fasted for 3 days, along with her maids, praying and seeking guidance before appearing before King Ahasuerus, embracing the uncertainty of life and death that hung over her mission. On the 3rd day, Esther approached the inner court of the king's palace, her heart pounding, her face serene but her spirit resolute. As she stepped into the presence of Ahasuerus, the law of the land held her life in his hand. Yet when the king saw Esther, he extended the golden scepter, sparing her life and inviting her to speak. Esther's words were carefully measured, her humility and wisdom guiding her appeal. She invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared, not revealing her petition immediately, but setting the stage for dialogue and persuasion. This first banquet was an exercise in strategy, patience, and subtle influence, demonstrating that courage was not rashness but careful preparation. Haman, unaware of the queen's true motive, accepted the invitation with pride and anticipation, convinced of his own ascendancy. Esther's planning and composure reflected an extraordinary discernment, recognizing that revelation at the wrong moment could destroy her people, yet knowing the time for disclosure must come. During the first banquet, Esther maintained a quiet composure, observing Haman and the king, considering the proper timing to reveal her plea. The following day, she invited them to a second banquet. Her courage culminated in the moment of revelation. She disclosed her identity as a Jew and exposed the plot against her people. Esther's voice carried the weight of personal and collective destiny as she described the annihilation decreed by Haman. The king's anger flared at the threat to his queen, and his fury turned directly against Haman, the architect of this genocidal scheme. In desperation, Haman begged Esther for mercy, falling upon the couch where she reclined, an image of his humiliation and impending doom. Yet the king, in righteous indignation, left the room and returned to find Haman falling before Esther, further sealing his fate. The story of Esther illustrates the extraordinary reversal of fortune. The one who plotted destruction becomes the instrument of his own downfall. The narrative demonstrates how courage, wisdom, and faith converge in moments of divine providence. King Ahasuerus, enraged by Haman's deception, commanded that he be executed on the very gallows that Haman had prepared for Mordecai. Haman's pride, ambition, and hatred were turned against him, and Mordecai's loyalty was honored. The king elevated Mordecai, giving him Haman's estate and placing him at the highest rank under the king, second only to the monarch himself. Mordecai's rise was marked not by vengeance but by justice and prudence. The king issued new letters in Mordecai's name, permitting the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. The Jews, who had been facing certain death, were now empowered to fight back and preserve their lives. Across the empire, the reversal of fortune brought relief, joy, and celebration. The 13th day of Adar, once marked for destruction, became a day of victory and deliverance, a testament to the power of courage, providence, and the unexpected favor that can arise when one steps into the purpose for which they were chosen. The Jews, once marked for destruction, now experienced deliverance, and the city of Susa echoed with celebration. Mordecai issued orders throughout the provinces to honor the Jews and establish a permanent commemoration of their salvation. These actions reflected not only political authority, but also a moral and spiritual recognition. When the vulnerable are preserved through courage and intervention, justice and mercy are intertwined. Mordecai, now clothed in royal garments of blue and white, rode through the city on a horse, displaying the honor bestowed upon him by King Ahasuerus. His rise symbolized the unexpected favor granted to the faithful who act with integrity. In the courts, whispers of divine orchestration grew, though the king and most officials may not have comprehended it fully. Esther, the once orphaned girl, continued to exemplify humility and courage, embracing her role as queen not for comfort, but for responsibility. The Jews observed these changes with profound gratitude, recognizing that survival required vigilance, unity, and faith in a providential plan larger than human calculation. The day following Haman's execution, the Jews defended themselves against the forces arrayed to destroy them. They struck down their enemies throughout the provinces of Persia, and in Susa, the capital city, they killed 500 men. Haman's 10 sons were also executed, their deaths a vivid symbol of justice served. The king's decree permitting the Jews to defend themselves was an extraordinary example of reversal in the ancient world. Those who faced annihilation were suddenly empowered to survive and even triumph. These events were chronicled meticulously by the royal scribes, ensuring that future generations would remember the miraculous preservation of an entire people. Amidst these battles, the courage of Esther and the loyalty of Mordecai stood at the center, demonstrating that survival often requires both strategic wisdom and moral courage. The narrative of Esther emphasizes not only the reversal of fortune, but also the accountability of leadership and the enduring principle that integrity and advocacy can protect the vulnerable, even within a vast and impersonal empire. In the aftermath of conflict, Mordecai and Esther sought to establish a lasting institution to honor the miraculous deliverance of the Jews. They formalized the festival of Purim, derived from the casting of lots, or pur, which had determined the date of their intended destruction. This celebration, observed on the 14th and 15th days of Adar, was designed to commemorate survival, unity, and divine favor. Feasting, charity, and the reading of the Book of Esther became central components, ensuring that generations to come would remember both the perils faced and the courage required to overcome them. The establishment of Purim underscores the human need to memorialize divine providence through ritual, culture, and shared memory. In the festival, joy, reflection, and gratitude converge, linking individual courage with collective identity. By enshrining these events in tradition, Esther and Mordecai transformed a moment of fear and uncertainty into a perpetual reminder that courage and faith can shape history in unexpected ways. Esther's story reverberates as an account of unexpected favor in a foreign and often hostile environment. She was an outsider, a Jew among Persians, a young woman with no political power, and yet her discernment, humility, and courage elevated her to a position of monumental influence. The narrative demonstrates that positions of influence often carry responsibility beyond personal comfort or ambition. Esther's example highlights the interplay between human agency and providential timing. Her ascent was not accidental, but part of a larger narrative in which preparation, loyalty, and moral courage intersected. Documentary scholars have long noted that her identity as both a Jew and a queen created a unique vantage point, allowing her to navigate political structures with strategy while remaining faithful to her people. The lessons of Esther extend beyond historical context, offering insight into the potential for ordinary individuals to become instruments of protection, justice, and life through careful, courageous action in the face of danger. The political environment of Persia under King Ahasuerus, with its intricate hierarchy of officials, advisors, and eunuchs, created both danger and opportunity. Haman, once the highest official, epitomized ambition unchecked by moral restraint. Mordecai's defiance of Haman's demand for homage, initially a personal act of conscience, escalated into a confrontation with systemic evil. Esther's intervention illustrates how timing, strategy, and courage can overturn even the most oppressive structures. By fasting, seeking counsel, and preparing the banquet, she ensured that her approach was calculated and persuasive. Her actions illuminate a key principle of leadership. Influence is most effective when it is exercised with foresight, humility, and moral clarity. Historical and theological commentators alike have observed that Esther's story does not merely glorify fortune or beauty, but rather emphasizes discernment, patience, and the willingness to embrace risk in pursuit of justice, even when the stakes include one's own life. The reversal of fortune in the story of Esther, where the plotters of destruction became the instruments of their own demise, reflects a recurring motif in biblical literature. In this narrative, the seemingly powerless are empowered, the humble are elevated, and the proud are humbled. The preservation of the Jews was not solely the result of political maneuvering, but also of courage aligned with divine providence. By refusing to reveal her heritage too soon, Esther exercised prudence. By fasting and preparing spiritually, she aligned her actions with a higher purpose. The king's favor, though crucial, was contingent upon Esther's wisdom and courage. Scholars have noted that her story demonstrates the dynamic between human choice and divine orchestration, highlighting the ways in which preparation, timing, and moral courage can amplify the impact of individuals within the larger currents of history. The festival of Purim, instituted by Mordecai and Esther, became an enduring legacy that echoed through the centuries. It was more than a celebration of survival. It was a ritual affirmation of courage, faith, and the unexpected ways in which favor manifests. The Jews across the empire commemorated this day with feasting, rejoicing, and giving gifts to one another and to the poor. The public reading of the Book of Esther ensured that each generation remembered the deliverance and the bravery of those who intervened on behalf of their people. Purim's observance also functioned as a social equalizer. The wealthy and powerful were reminded of their responsibility, and the marginalized were empowered through communal remembrance. Historians and theologians alike have observed that this festival captures the essence of Esther's story. In a world governed by power, wealth, and human ambition, the combination of courage, wisdom, and providence can bring about deliverance. Esther, an orphan girl who became queen, transformed her position of privilege into an instrument of life-saving advocacy, leaving a legacy of hope, moral courage, and strategic action. The story of Esther resonates across time as an example of finding favor in the unexpected. From the royal courts of Susa to the villages of Persia, her life illustrates how courage, humility, and discernment can alter history. The orphan who once lived in obscurity rose to become a queen, whose decisions shaped the fate of an entire people. By risking her life, aligning with moral principle, and trusting in the providential timing of her circumstances, Esther embodies a timeless lesson: the unexpected can become a platform for influence when courage meets opportunity. The Book of Esther closes not with chaos or despair, but with celebration, unity, and a ritualized memory of survival. Her story continues to inspire those who face uncertain circumstances, reminding the faithful that even in foreign lands, among political intrigue and imminent danger, favor can arise in the most unlikely places. Through her example, the narrative affirms that purpose, courage, and integrity can turn vulnerability into empowerment, leaving a legacy that endures far beyond the palace walls of Susa.